Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Millennium TV News. This is Fahmid Islam with you. Before moving on, let's look at today's top stories. Joe Biden rules out White House 2016 run. CIA WikiLeaks emails release was malicious crime. Syria crisis, US attacks Moscow welcome for Assad. Could Big Ben be replaced by Little John? Festival belongs to everyone, says President Abdul Hamid. Well, those were the headlines, now the details. Mr. Biden said his family was ready after the death of his son earlier this year, but he had now run out of time. He said it would be a mistake for Democrats to turn their backs on President Barack Obama's record. Democrats seeking an alternative to frontrunner Hillary Clinton had been urging the 72-year-old to run. Though he will not be a candidate, Mr. Biden said he will not be silent. I intend to speak out clearly and forcefully on where we stand as a party and where we need to go as a nation. He said any candidate would be making a tragic mistake to reject the Obama legacy and urged an end to political bickering. I believe we have to end the divisive partisan politics ripping apart this country, he said as he stood in the Rose Garden of the White House, flanked by his wife Jill and Mr. Obama. Repeating a dig at Mrs. Clinton that he has made several times this week, he said it was wrong to see Republicans as enemies. When asked at last week's Democratic debate, the former First Lady said she was proud of making an enemy out of Republicans. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State at the time and is expected to face tough questions about how she handled the incident. This is Mrs. Clinton's second appearance before the Republican-led committee. Her party says it is a witch hunt designed to harm her presidential bid. There have already been several congressional investigations into the attack by suspected Islamist militants on the U.S. compound in the Libyan city of Benghazi on 11 September 2012. The raid led to the deaths of Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other U.S. embassy staff. Mrs. Clinton is likely to be asked to explain. Observers said this is a key moment for Mrs. Clinton, who solidified her position as the Democrats' frontrunner for presidential candidate after her potential rival, Vice President Joe Biden, ruled himself out of the race on Wednesday. Her appearance before the House of Representatives Select Committee on Benghazi could further strengthen her position or raise doubts about her suitability as a presidential nominee. The Republicans on the committee are also under pressure to prove they have good reason to bring Mrs. Clinton before them again and are not just using it as an excuse to undermine her presidential candidacy. Comments made by Republican Representative Kevin McCarthy earlier this month as part of his bid to become Speaker of the House, suggesting the committee was doing just that, have not helped their position. 6 documents taken from an old account belonging to Mr. Brennan were published by the anti-secrecy group WikiLeaks. The CIA said there was no indication that anything classified was released, but the documents do include a draft security clearance application containing personal information. They appear to all date to 2009, when Mr. Brennan was seeking security clearance while applying for a job as a White House counterterrorism advisor. He was working in the private sector at the time, having already spent 25 years working for the CIA between 1980 and 2005. A high school student claimed he was responsible for hacking the AOL account, telling the New York Post he was protesting against U.S. foreign policy. The boy's Twitter account, which says he's 13, was published redacted images of what appears to be government information. MPs from English seats will get an effective veto on bills that apply to England only under the plans. Ministers say their fair and balanced proposals will give the English more say over their own destiny, but Labour and the SNP oppose the plans. The SNP said they simply exacerbate the further alienation of Scotland from the UK Parliament. Labour said they risked creating 2 tiers of MPs at Westminster. The issue of Scottish MPs voting on English-only laws has intensified, with more powers being devolved to the Scottish Parliament after last year's independence referendum. Ministers say their solution will address the long-standing anomaly known as the West Lothian question, by which Scottish MPs can vote on issues such as health and education affecting only England or England and Wales. But the House of Commons has no say on similar matters relating to Scotland, where such policies are devolved. Under the reforms, an additional parliamentary stage called a Grant Committee would allow English or English and Welsh MPs to scrutinise bills without the involvement of Scottish MPs. Interior Minister Bernard Cazeneuve said the measures were to protect some of the 6,000 people at the camp from cold temperatures as winter approaches. Another 460 police officers are to be deployed there from Thursday, he added. Numbers at the new jungle camp have swelled in recent months as the Europe migrant crisis has intensified. Most of them have fled conflict and poverty in Africa, the Middle East and Afghanistan and are trying to seek refuge across the Channel in the UK. Some people have opted for dangerous routes in their bid to make the crossing, with a number of deaths inside the Channel Tunnel in recent months. Mr. Cazeneuve announced the new measures on Wednesday after his 7th visit to the camp. He said a center sheltering women and children that currently has space for 200 people would allow in up to 400 by the end of the year. In the meantime, heated tents will be set up by the end of the week. He told reporters, vowing that no woman, no child will remain without a shelter in the city. The French minister also confirmed that police numbers would go up from 665 to 1,125 to help manage security in the area. A spokesman criticized Russia for putting on a red carpet welcome. The Syrian leader's trip on Tuesday came 3 weeks after Russia began airstrikes in Syria against Islamic State militants and other forces. It was Mr. Assad's first overseas trip since civil war broke out in Syria in 2011. The conflict has claimed more than 250,000 lives. On Thursday, a team of Russian MPs is due to meet President Assad and the head of the Syrian parliament in Damascus. While in Moscow, Mr. Assad made a point of expressing his gratitude for Russia's military intervention in the conflict. He said Russia's involvement had stopped terrorism becoming more widespread and harmful in Syria. For his part, Mr. Putin said Moscow's hope was that a long-term resolution can be achieved on the basis of a political process with the participation of all political forces, ethnic and religious groups. That by hosting the Syrian leader, President Putin was sending a clear message to the West that Moscow is a key player in the Middle East and there can be no solution to the Syrian conflict without Russia's involvement. One of the victims was seriously injured, a hospital spokesperson said. The condition of the attacker is not known. Police told the Swedish news agency TT that there was considerable confusion at the school in the western city of Trollhättan. We have a number of people injured, said Stefan Gustafsson from the regional police force. Mr. Gustafsson confirmed that officers had shot a man on the premises. His condition is unknown, he said. A recent report said the Great Clock needed urgent repairs costing £40 million, which, if not carried out, will cause international reputational damage. Now, Nottingham City Council has offered 10-ton bell Little John as a bounce replacement on BBC Radio 4. It is one part of the best set of clock bells in the country, says David Lyne, who maintains them. The famous chimes of the great clock on the Houses of Parliament signal the end of PM and the start of the news on Radio 4 at 18. News that Big Ben may be silenced prompted an offer from Nottingham Council that the BBC could broadcast the live chimes from its council house while London set is repaired. Deputy Leader Graham Chapman admitted it was a tongue-in-cheek gimmick, but it was the only possible alternative for Big Ben. This is an opportunity to have a bit of devolution, devolve the sound. The BBC moved out to Salford, now we can devolve the sound to Nottingham, he said. Horologist Mr. Lyon was bursting with pride at the sound of the bell. Among those detained in his brother-in-law and one of the two pilots who flew Guzman in his home state. Mexico's Attorney General said a member of Guzman's legal team described as a mastermind was also arrested. Guzman, head of the Sinaloa cartel, escaped from a high-security prison through a specially dug tunnel. Attorney General Aurelio Gomez told reporters on Wednesday that the suspected mastermind of the escape had repeatedly entered Altiplano prison to visit Guzman and update him on the operation's progress. She also said Guzman's brother-in-law had supervised the construction of the mile-long escape tunnel and organized transfer. Today we are able to affirm that the group responsible for planning, organizing and carrying out the escape from outside the prison has been broken up. Ms. Gomez said, without naming the suspects. Guzman was first arrested in Guatemala in 1993 and spent nearly a decade in another maximum security Mexican jail before escaping, repeatedly in a laundry basket. He was on the run for 13 years before being held again in 2004 after a series of high-profile arrests of associates and covert surveillance by the U.S. authorities. We'll take a short break here. Do stay with us. We are back in a moment with the headlines here. Germany tells Netanyahu, we are responsible for the Holocaust. Korean families part ways, brief reunion in North. Vanuatu court sentences 14 MPs to jail for corruption. India beef lynching premeditated, says inquiry. And UK retail sales rise in September. To Millennium TV News. Chancellor Angela Merkel said Germans were very clear in our minds that the Nazis were responsible. Benjamin Netanyahu had said Hitler had only wanted to expel Jews from Europe, but that Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, told him, "Burn them." His remarks have been condemned by Israeli historians and politicians. Speaking alongside Mrs. Merkel in Berlin, Mr. Netanyahu said, "No one should deny that Hitler was responsible for the Holocaust." But on Tuesday's speech at the World Zionist Congress in Jerusalem, Mr. Netanyahu claimed Husseini had provided the idea. Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time. He wanted to expel the Jews, he told the Congress, and Hajj Amin al-Husseini went to Hitler and said, "If you expel them, they'll all come here. So what should I do with them?" He asked. He said, "Burn them." About 390 South Koreans traveled to a mountain resort in the north for the 3-day reunion. A second group of 250 South Koreans will be at the resort from Saturday to Monday. Thousands of families have been torn apart by the Korean War, which ended in 1953, and have had next to no contact. For many, it was the first time they met after decades of separation, and given their age, for some it might well be the last time. The members of parliament were convicted of bribery on 9th October when President Baldwin Lonsdale was abroad. In his absence, Parliamentary Speaker Marcelino Pipete used his powers as acting president to pardon himself and the others. On his return, the president overturned the pardons, and the Supreme Court has now ruled them unconstitutional. The verdict puts half the governing party's MPs behind bars and makes it likely another election will be called, despite the current administration only taking power in June. The original corruption allegations were that Deputy Prime Minister Moana Carcasses paid 13 opposition politicians $35 million veto, which is $312,000 last year. On Thursday, Mr. Carcasses was sentenced to 4 years in prison and the others for 3 years each. A panel from the National Commission for Minorities visited the village of Bisada near Delhi, where Muhammad Akhlaq, a Muslim, was beaten to death. It said a Hindu temple had been used to plan the attack. Government ministers from the Hindu nationalist BJP have said the incident was a spontaneous expression of anger. In recent weeks, 3 Muslim men have been killed by Hindus, accusing them of eating or smuggling beef. Mr. Akhlaq's killing sparked furious debate about religious tolerance, with some criticizing Prime Minister Narendra Modi for not condemning the attack sooner. 2 weeks later, he called it sad and undesirable. Mr. Akhlaq, a farm worker in the state of Uttar Pradesh, was asleep next to his son last month when a mob burst in wielding sticks, swords and pistols. The villagers accused the 9-member family of having slaughtered and consumed a cow. Mr. Akhlaq and his son were beaten with bricks, kicked and stabbed repeatedly. President Abdul Hamid on Thursday said that religion belongs to a community but a festival belongs to all. The president was talking to media people during a reception he hosted to members of the Hindu community at Bongo Bhavan on the occasion of Durga Puja. President exchanged greetings and pleasantries with them during the reception. Religious Affairs Minister Principal Matiur Rahman was present. The president underscored the need for playing a role by all from one's respective position for the national development, upholding the spirit of the country's communal harmony and heritage. Durga Puja or other festivals are derived from the depth of tradition and culture of the Bengal. That's why a festival is never confined to the circle of a religion. A religion belongs to a community, but a festival belongs to all. The sense of unity and secularism is the characteristics of the people of the country, he said. Now the business news. Sales in the month grew 6.5% from the same month of 2004, the Office for National Statistics estimated. But the period covered was actually 30th August to 3rd October, which means it includes the bank holiday weekend at the end of August and the back-to-school shopping done then. September 2014 figures did not include the bank holiday weekend. The bank holiday applied in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Retailers report their sales on a weekly basis from Sunday to Saturday, which means that monthly figures do not necessarily cover the whole of a calendar month. Instead, a quarter will be made up to 2 4-week periods and a 5-week periods. This is only particularly important when key shopping days such as bank holidays officially fall in different months from year to year, which makes comparisons difficult. The quantity bought in the retail industry grew 1.9% last month compared with August. Average shop prices, including petrol stations, were 3.6% lower in September than they had been a year earlier. The Shanghai Composite Index closed up 1.45% to 3,368.74 points after shedding more than 3% on Wednesday. Hong Kong Stock Exchange reopened after a bank holiday, but the index failed to follow the mainland's strong lead. The benchmark Hang Seng finished the day down 0.63% at 22,845.37, while in Japan, shares fell by 0.6%, held back by a weak finish on Wall Street. Asia's biggest stock market saw its Nikkei 225 closing at 18,435.87 points. The losses came after a rally of almost 2% on Wednesday on hopes for more government stimulus to counter a weak economy. Now the sports news. Chairs were thrown outside Sinclair's Oyster Bar in Exchange Square in Manchester city centre. Greater Manchester Police tweeted the Polish football fans were held on suspicion of violent disorder. A GMP spokesperson said the injured man was treated at the scene by paramedics for a head wound, and the group of fans dispersed after officers arrived. In a later tweet, the force said a fourth male was arrested after being found hiding in a restaurant near where the other three were detained. The trouble flared before Manchester City's Champions League group match against Spanish side Sevilla at the Etihad Stadium, which kicked off at 19:45 BST. Reports have suggested some of the people involved in the trouble were wearing the colors of Polish club Slask Wrocław, whose fans have clashed with those of Sevilla recently. Liverpool ladies have promoted Stuart Rogers from assistant boss to manager on a 3-year deal to replace recently departed Matt Bird. The 29-year-old worker under Bird for 3 years had helped the Reds win consecutive Women's Super League titles in 2013 and 2014. Bird is taking over as Boston Breakers manager in the United States. "I'm absolutely delighted to have been given the opportunity to manage Liverpool ladies," said Rogers. "Having worked under the stewardship of Matt for the past 3 seasons, I know what a great club this is and cannot wait for get started." Rogers was manager at Blackburn Rovers ladies before he moved to Liverpool. Let's have a look at Millennium TV News Recap. Joe Biden rules out White House 2016 run. CIA WikiLeaks emails release was malicious crime. Syria crisis, US attacks Moscow welcome for Assad. Could Big Ben be replaced by Little John? Festival belongs to everyone, says President Abdul Hamid. You are up to date with our top stories so far here on Millennium TV, and don't forget to log into www.millenniumtv.net. Thank you for staying with us. Allah Hafiz.